Oh, help me believe. Help me believe. Help me believe in love once again.
Sage Wanderer here, and welcome to another episode of I Was a Rocker Turned Youth Pastor. So where I left us off was at the very foundation of my youth group, and I talked about getting a youth band put together. I think that was one of my biggest achievements. It was the intelligent choice to choose a youth band full of young people and train them up as musicians rather than trying to run the music program on my own ego as a musician. So I just delegated music to that group. I was so standoffish that it bugged them because they wanted me to mentor them, and I only did a little bit. Mainly, I just guided them. I kind of treated them like some of the musically inclined pastors I had worked for in the past as a band member. And so, anyway, I think that was a big measure of my success. That was going on along with what I called the Youth Leader Program. And I kind of gleaned this from the 180 youth group that was established in Tulsa. And I paid a fee to go up there and take some courses. And I took my youth group, my youth leaders with me up there. We stayed for a few days, rented a hotel room, and we got some training. I bought some training materials, and I began to train my youth leaders in cell ministry. And I don't mean like gel cell. I mean like cells like cellular. And so some people call them small groups. And so what I did, I took the Jesus model and I developed 12 disciples. I was aiming at 12. I don't think I got to 12. It's training, keeping, and holding volunteers, especially when they're young and just launching out in life, can be a challenge. So these youth leaders that I handpicked, many of them were deacons and elders' children. So they were pretty strong Christians with already some established gifts. And I began to train them in their gifting, gift assessments, that sort of thing, find out what they're good at. And then I broke up my youth group, and as it grew, at first, they were almost more leaders than kids. But as the word got out and the growth started to happen, each youth leader would have 2 or 3 kids that they were responsible for looking after. In other words, they would call on them during the week. They would get to know their parents. They would, put them on a prayer list and pray for them. On Wednesday night during the services, if they needed prayer, I would include them. If one of their kids came up, they would automatically come up with them and help me minister to them. And I cross-trained them in healing ministry, deliverance ministry. Everything that we did, all of the ministries that were available in the church were available to the youth group and administered by these young lay ministers who I was overseeing and closely managing. And I would say as the youth group grew and we got to be 60, 70, 80, 100 kids in the youth group, and each one of my youth leaders had 8, 10, 12, 15 kids that they were looking out for, it became a lot of work for them, but it allowed us to grow to a degree where we still had hands-on, one-on-one kind of ministry opportunities, right? Which you lose when you're the only guy doing ministry and you get over 10 or 12 people in your youth group or in your church or any of that. Then you get to where you are not available to them as often and as much as you'd like to be or as you need to be to ensure their spiritual growth. So by doing this in delegation, I was able to grow bigger. And within each delegated youth pastor, youth leader, I call them, I told them that it's their job to find within our own youth group somebody that's coming of age and mentor them and train your own replacement. That was my gig. Train your own replacement was one of my things that I taught my youth leaders. Other things I did that I think were responsible for growth is that you'd be shocked in America how many kids go hungry after school. That latchkey kids, kids that live with single parents who are working two jobs sometimes, they come home from school and the house is empty and devoid of anything to eat. And I found out that kids were coming to my youth group hungry, and I can't handle a hungry kid, so I started, and I'm like, I can't feed the poor kids and not feed the rich kids, because that creates a class system. It creates a welfare system in my youth group. I can't do that. So it was just free food for everybody. And I just did the math, and I'm like, you know what? We'll just get more money. And I started spending more money, and this is when I started having a problem, because at the same time that the youth group was growing, the church was in a decline. And the money was a big issue. And part of this was the what would eventually be the big crash that happened in the 2000s, the banking crash, the prime lending debacle, subprime mortgage debacle, and so which wiped me out, and I wasn't alone. Wiped a lot of people out. I got hit hard, just from the stock market and the land prices and everything just plummeting at once. But at any rate, the church was in decline while the youth group was on the rise, and they started clamping down on me on money. And I took the job not realizing they gave me a copy of the canon law, and I was supposed to read it. And I'm a speed reader, so I can read something and promise you I read it, but maybe not be able to recall it because I read it so fast and I didn't study it. And I trusted this church, so I just went in, and I didn't know my power or my weaknesses. And when they pulled my money, I was just like, now what am I going to do? I can't feed the kids. I can't buy props. I can't take my youth leaders out and reward them for a job well done. I can't have parties. I can't, they just pulled my funding. And basically they would buy books and Bibles, and that was about it. But part of that was to also control me, because as my youth group grew and the church diminished, I became a threat to the leaders in some weird way that honestly I still don't understand, other than it's jealousy based. And so they, one of the things right up front is the elders in the church and the church board and through the bishop and other leaders kept trying to control how much of the church I used on Wednesday nights, whether I was allowed to go out and use the main church, whether I had to keep if I kept everybody in the youth room they gave me, and I didn't use the rest of the church on Wednesday night, I only had room for about 15 kids. And so when I got to 10 or 15 kids, I'm like, look, we want to go have church in the church. We want to play in the youth group, and we want to go and have church in the church. And, I had elders and deacons who were trying to control me through the board, through the bishop. And I still don't really understand, other than they just didn't like me. And some people are just jealous of success. And they didn't like how I was doing it, maybe. Because they thought we should all sit in a circle and read the Bible, and I should turn them into little Bible drone baby people, instead of casting this wide net out in the community and pulling all these wild and pagan kids and tattooed and pierced and, eventually got so big that I had to put together a small security unit that I mainly staffed with females. And the reason being is that they were mainly to narc off to me so I could handle it. I just needed some narcs, right? Because we had issues like, we caught a couple having sex in the hallway. I had to bust up a pot dealer who found out he could sell pot to my youth group out in the parking lot. Because, that church at the time was in the old J.C. Penney's. And so we were in a strip mall. And so they just parked in the parking lot and they were selling. So I had some issues, some growing pains, as it were, but I handled them judiciously and carefully. I'll tell you how I handled the pot dealer, because I knew him. He was a kid grown kid that I actually had a relationship with. And, I didn't preach sin, I preached redemption. I didn't preach sin, I preached life planning. So if you preach sin and you tell kids you can't do this because you're going to hell, most kids can't really imagine hell, and you can try to convince them, but, it's way harder to scare kids these days. They watch horror movies from the time they're born. And so I got an issue with this pot dealer. And finally, I just followed my nose because, then as now, I was an old stoner. I was just not smoking back in those days. As I was a pastor, obviously, you got to walk the walk and talk the talk. But I know pot when I smell it, right? So I through the parking lot and I hit out. I used my ninja skills. I hit out and I saw him doing it. I was like, there it is. He just sold the doobie. There goes. And I just shook him down. I just went over there like a cop, and they knew me, and they, I got my bluff in on my youth group pretty early because I could still do about a 4 foot off the ground jumping front snap kick back then, even though I was a big fat overweight man. I could just jump up in the air and kick a light bulb right off the ceiling. I used to be, you see how capable I am now after whooping diabetes, and imagine how I was when I was 30 something. But anyway, so I just marched right up there and went, look, boys, I sure would hate to have you guys arrested. And, I'm not going to preach at you, and I'm not going to threaten you with hell, or I'm not going to tell you how the devil's going to get you. I'm just saying what you're doing is illegal. I can't tolerate it on or near or around church property, and I'm going to turn you in if you don't stop it right now and never, ever, ever, ever do that again around me. And you better straighten up because prison is no place for a boy like you. Red. Redheaded kid. I stopped it, I had to deal with some racism because it was a multicultural youth group. I had blacks and Hispanics and Asian kids from India. And so I really, it was challenging. It was very much a rewarding experience. But one of the major things I think grew my youth group, and the trouble for me is I know how to relate to rowdy boys, like my potential pot dealing student, right? I know how to deal with rambunctious teenagers who want to fight. I know how to break up fights. I know how to fix it. I know how to make them make nice. I'm good at all those things. I'm not good with girls. I just, you know what? When I was a teenager, I dated college girls. When I was college age, I dated middle-aged women because I didn't then, don't now, and never have understood a teenage girl. The best that I can do is realize that I don't understand them and I should quit trying. So, because my wife was not an active member of my ministry by her own choice, I found some college graduate age female ministry people who had a call of missionary work and outreach on them. And I really just, I put a lot of time and energy getting them to get in touch with their girl side and to make a girls club within my youth group, essentially, and just kind of create this inclusive all girls clique and do the ministry, hands-on ministry portion with the girls that I couldn't do. I can't do it. And so, I authorized them to have off-site slumber parties and stuff like that. And I trusted the one girl I put in charge of the whole program so well that she was actually a nanny for my own kids. That because I trained her so well, I trusted her with my kids, so I just hired her to babysit for me and help me out in that area as a parent myself. And I think that's one of the wise things I did. But I think the thing that really took it home for the boys and made the boys, besides all the cool girls that started showing up in my youth group, that made my youth group a destination place on Wednesday night and for any other type of lock-in or anything, was that I projected. Now, our church had video projectors. And the thing is, I also happen to be in that church, not just the youth pastor, but the technology pastor as well. So I'm the guy responsible for buying the cameras, buying the audio equipment and installing all of it, putting up the big rear projection screens. Later on, it was rear projection screens. But at first, when I was first in charge of it, we had these portable projectors that were hung from the ceiling to project on the screens on the wall the lyrics. It's computer from a laptop. Our assistant sound guy was running the graphics. And when the pastor goes up there, you've seen it all. Everyone uses video now in church. And so I was on the pioneering cutting edge of that. So I knew it was pretty easy for me to just rewire and re-rig and reconfigure things for Wednesday night to project video games. So I got Xbox, I got all the Nintendo and the PlayStations and everything. I got with my youth leaders who were all video game nuts, and I had been that in the past, but I wasn't up to date, so I got them to help me out. We made some purchases. I banned violent games. I knew that that would just be a problem with some parents, so I restricted them to driving games and sport games. You know, Madden, Bill Madden, Bob Madden. I'm not a sports person. That's another thing I did. I made sure I had a football expert who was my second in command, so all that sport-related stuff, I could just turn it over to him, and he could sport it up with them boys that are into sports, because my idea, if you don't hunt it down and kill it, it's not a sport. Like, if blood is not shed, this is a sport. This is a sport. This is not, what is this? This is fighting over a ball of air. I don't know. I'm just a little different. Everyone knows that. That's why you love me, part of why you love me. But I was smart enough to know that's the thing I got to give you as a piece of advice. Be smart enough to know your weaknesses and your shortcomings and compensate them by delegating those areas to other people who are experts in it. And don't be afraid to do that, and you'll never succeed if you don't. You'll always be limited by your own abilities and knowledge. But if you learn to delegate, you can rise above other people in anything. This is anything, not just ministry. So I projected these video games up, and furthermore, the sound is important in video games. I knew that. It's something I knew being a gamer myself. So I set up I had a portable PA system. Actually, I had 2 portable PA systems. So I set up 2 portable PA systems right at the perfect position on the projected video screens that were life-size. When a football player throws a football at my youth group, he was 6, 7, or even 8 feet tall throwing that football, because I'm projecting up on this huge, 16 by or 20 by 16 screen. It's a huge. They're for the whole church. But right in front, when it's like this, like you're on the front row at the movies, I set up sound blasting stereo PA hooked up to the video games right in your face. And because I got the speaker so close, I could make it so loud that it would just about blow you out of the chair, but 10 feet back where the rest of the youth group is going on, and people are playing games, and boys and girls are interacting, and everybody's eating and having free time, those video games would be loud to the viewer, but not loud to the rest of the group. And then, another thing I did that I attribute a lot of my success to is that I realized that a lot of kids lived out of town, and our church was close to the local junior high and high school. And that a lot of the kids that didn't have a way, or parents didn't have, a lot of the kids who were home alone, latchkey kids in their houses normally on Wednesday night, or getting in trouble in their apartment complexes, instead of going home on the bus, they would come to the youth group and hang out in the parking lot and wait for me to open. But since I was, my day started at 9 a.m. or even 8 a.m. sometimes on Wednesday, and I went until 11, 12 o'clock at night. That was my big day, was Wednesday. You want to build a youth group? Be ready to put in those kind of hours, guys. Lazy youth leaders, lazy preachers, lazy people who don't want to go in, and they won't work as hard for Jesus as they work for their bosses downtown, and they won't put the time and energy in it, and they're collecting a salary from a church and doing as little as possible, or only showing up on church nights. You are defrauding the kingdom. I'm sorry. I feel that way. They got their money's worth out of Old Sage Wanderer, let me tell you. I worked long hours. I was scheduled 60, and often I worked 120 hours a week for what a teacher gets paid. An entry-level teacher. So, and without any benefits or anything. no health insurance, none of that. So, anyway, I saw the kids, because I was already at the church getting ready for the day, show up right after school let out, and so of course they're going to get in trouble in the parking lot. They're going to fuss, and they're going to fight, and they're going to scratch somebody's car, or they're going to get in trouble with their skateboard or something. So I counseled with the bishop, and by the time I made this decision, I had been given total control of the church on Wednesday after 5. Or after 4:30, because the office closed at 4:30 every day. And so I had I had some elders and some deacons who ganged up on me and wanted to try to hold me in that little room. But once they let me out of that little room, the bishop gave me the whole church for all of Wednesday night. And I could do whatever I wanted as long as by Sunday morning it was all back in place and ready for worship service. And since I was a major player in the worship service and the band and running the technology and the sound and the video and all that, and I had probably 8 or 10 volunteers in that department that was under me. So I was not just a department leader of the youth group with people under me. I also led other departments in that church. And they got their money's worth out of me. I had a bunch of hats in that church. And I wasn't ashamed to get my hands dirty. And so anyway, when I started opening early, I got pushback from the deacon board, from the elders again. This guy is turning our church into a community outreach center. Well, what is wrong with that? Would you rather have him here or over there, learning about drugs, sex, and rock and roll like the forgotten generation of the 80s? Right? We didn't amount to nothing because y'all left us home alone to take care of ourselves when we got raised by MTV. I was an the millennials really got brainwashed. And I was a weapon against that brainwashing in the millennial generation in that town for sure. So, but I fought the powers that be, and it grew. And so the thing is, when they pulled my funding, I didn't finish that part of the story. When they told me, hey, we're losing money, we can't feed these kids, you can't give away prizes, you can't have lock-ins, otherwise you're just going to have to charge them. And that's what they kept wanting me to do. They were used to youth pastors who charged entry to every event, they didn't give away food, they sold food. They didn't give away t-shirts, they sold t-shirts, right? And I wanted to give, because I was ministering to all of the children, the poor and the rich and the middle class, all of them. And I wanted there to be no racial division in the group, so I made it all free. But the church wouldn't pay for it. And the deacon board and the elder board were against me. And so was the chief financial officer for the church corporation. One of my best friends, but she just stood in my way. But she gave me the key because I was in her office and I'm like, look, Cheryl, you know what I do? You work in the office with me every day. You see how many kids I'm reaching. You know that I need a budget. I have a budget. I'm not just trying to teach kids Bible verses. I'm changing lives. I'm affecting the community. You got to get behind me. And she liked me even though she was the toughest financial officer of any church I ever worked for. And I have a friend that I've been talking to that she reminds me so much of her. They have the same personality. It's ESTJ. I'm an ENTP, and that other lady was an ESTJ. But we kind of over that. But she helped me because she liked me, and she respected what I was doing. And she goes, "Have you read Canon Law?" And I went, "What is that, like a novel?" And then I went, "Oh, the bylaws of the church, Canon Law, the bylaws." And she said, "You signed them, didn't you read them?" And I went, "Yeah." And she said, "Look up department head rights and the financial section." So I went back in my office. I dug out Canon Law. I opened it. I'm digging through. It's a book this thick, right? And I boom, boom, boom. I was a department head. And there was a clause in there that said if a department head raises his own money, he or she alone has the right to spend the funds however they see fit, as long as it is to the attribution of the program. In other words, they can't take the money, right? But they can spend the money however they see fit if they raise the money. If they're using budget money, it can be cut, it can be controlled, they can use it to control you, they can take it away, they can give it to somebody else, they can give you more or less, but the money you raise is yours. And I went ding, 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 and I became a fundraiser. And, to give you an instance, I raised $25,000 in one day. I ended up using money from that to buy a school bus. And so I won't go into detail in this video, but in the next video, we'll talk about what happened when I tried to spend the money I raised for something different than what they thought I was going to spend the money for. Because in past times, when they raised money in the youth group, it was for one particular program or thing that they did annually that I put an end to. And I'll tell you about that one in the next video. But once again, this is how I was a rocker turned youth pastor, and how I succeeded to grow a very, very big youth group in Texas, and how if you listen to and learn from me, you can too. All right, we'll talk to you next time.
Oh, help me believe. Help me believe. Help me